Hello sir, my name is Bhutwala Raj and my roll number is 16EX20007. In this presentation, I will explain you the work that I undertook in my internship of the fourth year. My title for the project was Search for Seasonal Variations in Seismicity linked to the hydraulic loading of a fault by exploring the database of seismic signals using deep learning. This project was undertaken under Professor Dr. Sophie Giffard and Dr. John Luc of France. And my university at which the internship was took place was University of Grenoble Alpes in France. So moving on, I will cover this five parts: the objective, the pre-processing of data, the methods used, the results, and the further work that could be done. So the objective was to identify the localized seismic events under the purview of two stations, OGAP and OGME, both located in the Annecy region of France. So basically, I had to determine small amplitude localized seismic events which were previously not founded in the seismic database. And using the detected events, I had to train a new model using deep learning to automate the process of identifying seismic events from a huge database of seismic data. So, since the seismic data is of thousands of GBs and very large, it becomes essential to automate the process. So, this project deals with the very same thing. And after the seasonality of occurrence of local seismic events is found, then I had to correlate that with the hydraulic loading of the fault using rainfall data. So the data was in the figure, as you can see that there are seismic stations, multiple seismic stations placed at many places in Annecy region of France. And so there were total 100 stations from which these two particular stations, OGEP and OGME, were selected. And the seismic data contained the data in three components: Z, N, and E. So Z is the vertical component, N is the north-south component of the data, and E is the east-west component of the data. And the data was available from 2010 to the current time. So that is the total data was 2000. So total data was for 10 years. And the data was sampled at 100 Hertz, 120 Hertz and 125 Hertz at different years. So these are some of the local seismic events which I had to detect automatically and which was the purpose of the project. It can be seen here that this is a particular seismic event in which the first is the Z component, this is the N component, and this is the E component. So since this is a local event, the S waves reach the receiver earlier, and we can see a big spike over here, and the P waves reach the component the earlier seismometer earlier, and it registers a huge spike, and the S waves, secondary waves, reach a bit later depending upon the distance of the hypocenter from the receiver, epicenter from the receiver. This kind of uh, spike is observed in N and E components 0.4 to 0.5 seconds later after the arrival of P waves. So similarly, there are different kinds of events that can be seen in this figure. So before proceeding on to finding the local seismic events which were shown in the previous slide, I had to do the pre-processing of the data. So the pre-processing consisted of this chart can represent the pre-processing of the data, that the raw three channels were present. They were band passed using filter between 1 Hz to 50 Hz all the traces that were present were merged and the missing values were replaced with constant values. And since the number of uh, signal values in all the three components were not same, they were equalized. And I divided them into two parts, 12 to 5 a.m. and 10 to 12 a.m. just for the training purpose, because during that time the external human disturbance would be the least and it would be easier to detect the events. So the workflow implemented was that I manually tried to determine the local seismic events using STA-LTA ratio, which is the short-term average and by long-term average ratio, and the kurtosis values on the pre-processed data. Then those events which I obtained were used to train a deep learning model using the the already trained model of another postdoc scholar which had a paper on her own work. After that, I created a continuous detector which can determine the events in real time. Now, after I uh, obtain new events using the continuous detector, I use the newly detected events in again training the data to increase the efficiency of the model. So such iterations of finding new events, using them to train the new model and obtaining new models, such iterations were continued till a very high amount of accuracy was achieved. And then the automation of the process was done to establish the seasonality of events. So this is how I obtain the manually events using the STA-LTA ratio. Now transfer learning. So transfer learning is basically using of an already existing model and retraining the weights of the model in order to obtain the classification which we want in our particular project. Hence, this method is state of the art method in machine learning and this was used to determine the earthquake events. And this is the continuous detector. As you can see in the figure, this is the this one block represents 100 values, signal values. Now, similarly, I took a window, sliding window of 500 events, which is represented by the 5 blocks, and run this sequential input for whole day and determine new events. The results. So, using transfer learning, I was able to, there were three different approaches which I used. One was the training the data from scratch, which obtained the accuracy of 66.32 using a transfer learning fixed feature extractor, which basically keeps the previous model which I am using almost the same and does not change drastically with the new data that I am inputting. So that gave a very bad result of 51% accuracy. But the transfer learning with fine tuning gave the accuracy of 99.48%, which was a very impressive accuracy for the state of the art algorithm. And because of this, I was able to find out 137 new local earthquake events which were also incorporated in the French National Archives. So this is the model trained from scratch, which is more or less stagnant. It does not improve with iterations. Transfer learning fixed feature, it improves a bit, but it is highly unstable and it does not converge. While the transfer learning model with fine tuning converged perfectly and it gave very high accuracy, almost equal to 100%. The further work which could have been possible from my internship was that to obtain the optimal parameters which were not included in the primary study, and also correlating this occurrence of events in the span of 10 years and trying to predict such local events in the future as well. Also, after this seasonality is established, we can also find out the relation of rainfall data and the hydraulic loading of the fault, which will be helpful in further understanding of earthquakes. My contribution in this project would be in future appreciated and incorporated in a research paper. Thank you.